Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from at AKwx TV to at NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Welcome to today's show. Up first here, how's this weather graphic? We've got a watch out, and that's a flood watch out for ice jam flooding on the Yukon River, specifically at Eagle, and that's probably going to be out until the ice is gone. And from there, moving on to the breakup map, you can see the Yukon here still pretty much mostly ice into the Canada, on up to where it meets the Porcupine River, and really all the way down on out to the Delta. Kuskokwim River about the same, maybe some thinner places starting to show up, and about continuing to open up along the Susitna, Little Susitna River, Copper River as well. Otherwise, rivers to the north and back to the west here, still pretty solid ice. And from there, looking at satellite imagery, you can see a band of moisture right through here. Upper level trough coming eastward there, bringing some areas of light snow to the western Arctic coast today, and clouds all the way to the east there. And some showers going on along this band from northeast to southwest in toward Togiak Bay today. Nothing heavy, just cloudy skies with a few showers around there, and it really trails off into the Alaska Peninsula there with some clouds. Some clouds here up into south central Alaska. Again, get this rolling once again, kind of forms here and then moves inland, and also some convection kind of showing up as well there, enhancing the cloud layers. Rain, western Prince William Sound, southern Kenai Peninsula, actually into the northern Kenai Peninsula, with over an inch falling today at Portage again, and about a quarter of an inch at Cordova today, and also this moisture spreading rain in across the Panhandle, keeping temperatures down from what they were yesterday, but still pretty mild here. Central eastern interior, some sunshine, hazy sunshine, temperatures in the 50s to some cases mid-60s by early afternoon today. Then a break, good clear skies over the Pribilos, gusty winds, kind of chilly in the 30s there for St. Paul, with winds gusting 25 to 30 miles an hour, even colder back here to the west and northwest of this boundary here. Kotzebue in the 20s, as well as Buckland, with northwest winds gusting 20 to 30 miles an hour today. And back to the west, next system pushing moisture into the western Aleutians, with an area high pressure in between or out in advance there, slowing it down, and but it won't stop it altogether. On the chart today, there's a front out there bringing some increased wind and precipitation into the western Aleutians west of Adak, with high pressure in this area, and that providing the gusty winds today, which are already diminishing there for the Pribilof Islands. Winds also diminishing from the 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts they had in Alaska earlier today. A few showers along this trough extending from the eastern Aleutians all the way up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast there, with a few skiffs of snow along the Arctic coast, clearing out behind that feature with lighter winds, light winds, milder temperatures here over the eastern interior. And again, moisture, Kodiak Island up along this front here as it weakens and pushes northwards, spreading into the Panhandle. Another system down here to the south, moving up tonight. Periods of rain, more showery conditions, but staying wet over the southern Panhandle. Winds kind of gusty here. Gale force winds in store for the southern coast of the Panhandle tomorrow as this front approaches, drying out, but still chance of showers for the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound. Variably cloudy south central Alaska. Showers for the most part ending for Kodiak. Nice over the interior here. High pressure shifting eastward, and that's going to allow that front to come a little farther to the east here tonight. Maybe bringing some rain in toward Atka. Not tonight, but definitely tomorrow. It'll push it into the central Aleutians there. Winds really in advance of that, not much of a factor at all. Maybe small craft advisories at the strongest. Light variable winds under the ridge of high pressure here over the eastern Bering Sea, and light breezes for the Alaska Peninsula. Light winds, mostly sunny skies, interior Alaska, highs 50s to lower 60s, and then in some cases mid to upper 60s over toward the eastern areas, maybe into the Tanana Valley around Fairbanks as well. Next surge of moisture coming up with this front now. Again, gale force winds along the south coast of the Panhandle, and maybe some gales here on the Kamishak Barren Island areas and down toward Kodiak Island possibly, but definitely an increase in the winds, increasing rain again tomorrow afternoon as that moisture comes in up toward the North Gulf Coast. Periods of rain the entire day for the southeast coast with a lot of IFR, flying conditions there. Mostly sunny and warm over the interior. Outlook for Saturday, first day of the weekend, maybe some afternoon showers being triggered by the warm temperatures now rising pushing up towards 70 for Saturday here over the eastern interior. High pressure right over Prince William Sound, or up actually near Cape St. Elias there. Light winds along the coast here. Leftover moisture, diminishing showers for the Panhandle, mostly cloudy skies. This front bringing increasing wind and moisture into the Yukon Delta coast, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, right up into the Bering Strait in the afternoon with some rain trailing down along that weak front into the eastern Aleutians, pushing in toward the Alaska Peninsula. Lows tonight, mid to upper teens for the Arctic coast north slope, and mid-teens for the northwest areas there, mid-20s for the Nome area and St. Lawrence Island. Lows in the 30s to lower 40s, eastern central interior, lower 40s for south central Alaska, mid-30s Copper River Basin, mid-30s Bristol Bay, and in the 40s for the Panhandle, 30s out to the Aleutians. Highs tomorrow, 65 to 70, Yukon Flats, maybe in toward the Fairbanks area, and lower 60s, 60 to 65, Susitna Valley, maybe even into the Kenai Peninsula with a little more sunshine. Cooler again with 50s for the Panhandle, upper 40s Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula here, upper 30s for the Pribilofs. And for Saturday morning, 20s and teens and 20s north of the Brooks Range, 30s to lower 40s south, warmest here to the east, cooler out toward the Bering Strait, in the 30s for the Bering Sea and Aleutians, 40s south central Alaska and the Panhandle, followed by highs, again 50s for the southeast coast, and mid 50s to lower 60s south central Alaska, and 65 to 70 central and eastern interior, lower 30s for the Arctic coast. I believe that's pushing above the seasonal normals now for a change for the Arctic coast. 30s and 40s for the Bering Sea and Aleutian areas.
Hello, Alaska. I'm hydrologist Bob Busey, here with the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and I'm here to bring you the 2023 Alaska Spring Breakup Outlook. As a reminder, it's always a good idea to be flood ready, especially this time of year as we move deeper into breakup season. You most likely have your emergency plan and your communication plan lined out, but if you haven't, it's not too late to start. It's also a good time to think about maybe moving any vehicles up to higher ground and putting together an emergency first aid kit, any medications you might need, any personal local foods you might have, put those in a safe place and they're ready to reach. Just going to touch on this briefly. We've all been going over week by week these factors. These are the elements that go into a severe breakup or a mild breakup. The amount of snow on the ground, the snowpack, the ice thickness and strength, and spring weather patterns. We're going to touch on all three of these briefly over the next few minutes. So, snowpack. This is what it looked like on April 1st. We had the long-term average, we are right around 100 to 150%, so 1.5 times the average. The deeper the blue, the more snow. But April 1st was quite a while ago at this point. Let's talk about how things look today. Here's a map as of yesterday showing snowpack across Alaska, and this is as a percentage of the snowpack about a month ago. You can see many of the low-lying areas. They're approaching snow-free, but not necessarily snow-free yet. But as you move up higher in elevation and higher up towards the North Slope and the Brooks Range, there's still quite a bit of snow. So while where you are locally, you might not see much snow, there still might be quite a bit of snow in your watershed, and just be aware of that in how it relates to the ice, the river ice. Also, ice thickness. It's May, we don't have too many more ice thickness measurements, but the ones that we do, they show that it's still pretty thick in these locations, 3 to 4 feet. And we got a report yesterday from an observer that it's still pretty good integrity on the ice in the Eagle area. So, as always, think twice on ice. Moving on to flood potential. This is our 48-hour map, and we have a watch out for the Eagle area, and we're telling you to be careful on the Yukon further south of downriver of Eagle. For more information, visit our webpage. Well, we are a little further into spring, and that does mean that for the parts of Alaska that aren't the interior and the northern reaches, there is some open water. Here's a current map of our spring breakup, and you can keep tabs and maybe do some recreational boating on some of these navigable places. It's on our main webpage, and you can see our color code over here, and some places are mostly open, which can mean you can get out there. We also released an updated version of our breakup outlook. This is from yesterday, and we shifted things slightly. We shifted by a day from 4 to 7 days later than average in the eastern Alaska, and we shifted by a day later the outlook for western Alaska, and we're now saying 8 to 11 days later. What does 8 to 11 days later mean? Well, we do have some actual breakups now. This is the long-term period of record breakup dates. And you can see now that we have Dawson and we have Nenana. Dawson went out 5 days later than average, and Nenana went 8 days later. And you can kind of anchor everything downstream of those. Similarly, on the Kuskokwim, it went out on Nikolai, and Nikolai was 9 days later than average. But there's a pretty big spread on Nikolai, and it doesn't kind of match up quite as nicely with other parts of the Kuskokwim. So we're just happy that it's broken up. Moving on to temperature, this is the Climate Prediction Center's outlook for Alaska, temperature-wise, and you'll see here that things are like slightly above normal or slightly below normal, depending on where you are. But if you zoom in on the pie charts, we're basically looking like things are going to be about normal, just a nudge one way or the other, not like anything to get excited about. If it's warmer, it's just kind of, it's normal. But what does normal mean? Well, it is mid-May. And that means temperatures are above freezing for the most part. This is looking at Bethel and the lower Kuskokwim, and you can see the temperatures really popped up, and we're getting some nice warming, and the extended forecast is temperatures not going below freezing at night. If we move upriver to McGrath, it's the same story. We had a cold March, cold April, they were kind of colder than average, you can see. And but since late April and into May, temperature has been normal, and now that temperatures are normal in May, that means we're getting above freezing, and we're staying above freezing at night. I focused quite a bit today on the Yukon. I focused on the Kuskokwim, but there are other rivers in Alaska, and there are people that care about them. This is a zoom in on Koyukuk, and we're looking at Bettles. In Bettles, the story is basically the same as it has been southward. We had a cold spring, March and April, and then in late April, things became approaching normal. But once again, normal in April and late April and May means temperatures around freezing, and now we're getting to be pretty warming, and all that snow that didn't melt in April is now melting in May. The big event of the week was both Nenana breaking up and also Dawson. Here's a little clip of the river going out in Dawson from earlier this week. You can see it really gets rolling, and then as the day goes on, there's a little bit less ice and a little bit more flow. So that's Canada. How about Alaska? This is the first community on the Yukon downriver of Dawson, and this is Eagle. Here, this is a current hydrograph as of this morning, and you can see that the stage in Eagle is rising and rising, but we haven't had breakup as of now, but we may have it in the next day or two when we anticipate, just like I had the 48-hour warning out there. So great. let's take a look at some photos from around the state. This is down by Fairbanks on the Noaa. Lots of ice in the river, and then we move down to the Kuskokwim. This is Sleet Mute, and then moving downstream, this is some river watch photos from our team on the Kuskokwim. You can see that there's still quite a bit of ice and still not as much melting as we'd like to see. Anyway, thanks for listening, and thank you so much for tuning in for our community calls, and as well for our observers who have been sending in messages, sending in photos via Fresh Eyes on Ice or email, and everyone who's paying attention to being safe this flood season.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to aviation. A couple areas of IFR out over the Bering Sea. One through the central Bering Sea here, staying north of the Aleutians, but moving in on the Pribilofs and extending northeastward to the Yukon Delta coast. On up into the Bering Strait. Then the next one out here, pushing eastward, the next front into the western Aleutians, marginal VFR over to the Fox Islands, and into the Alaska Peninsula. South side, though, pretty nice. IFR, Gulf of Alaska, pushing in toward the Prince of Wales Island coastline there, and on up into western Prince William Sound. Otherwise, mostly VFR in the interior with an upper trough cutting eastward across the North Slope and Arctic coast. Kind of some moisture coming into the Koyukuk Valley there, and IFR for the eastern Arctic coast, North Slope. Also, Kotzebue Sound up along the northwest coast. And for the afternoon, this area lifts up to the northeast there, keeping the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline in the IFR, and marginal to the north slope there, but to the west, improving, good VFR, much of western interior Alaska, still some IFR along the Yukon Delta coast, and extending down southward into the eastern Aleutians along the north shore of the Alaska Peninsula, western Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay VFR, IFR hanging up here on the eastern Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound, probably pushing into eastern Turnagain Arm to a certain extent, and marginal VFR up to the Talkeetnas, possibly, more likely marginal for the Matanuska Valley, and then IFR for the Panhandle, and big area of IFR out here over moving eastward into the central Aleutians, and then for the morning hours, that area slides a little bit to the east, not making a really big jog eastward there, but far enough to get into about Nikolsky with some IFR and trailing back to Adak and Atka, and then again, very close to the Pribilofs, marginal VFR up to the Yukon Delta coast, covering Nunivak, St. Lawrence Island, VFR in the interior, lingering IFR here over the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, also lingering IFR up along the North Gulf Coast, western Prince William Sound, Fognak, northern Kodiak Island, and areas of the Panhandle, IFR otherwise marginal. For the afternoon, improvement, becoming marginal VFR, some scattered areas of VFR for the southeast coast, mostly marginal Kodiak Island up into Cook Inlet, the Kenai Peninsula, northern Cook Inlet, Matanuska Valley, areas of VFR, lingering marginal VFR along the Alaska Range there into the Wrangell Mountains and up over the eastern interior. Good VFR to the west, to the north. This area now making landfall along the southwest coast, on up through the Bering Strait and southward into the western Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutians, but pretty good back out to the west. And for passes, Anatuvik, that moisture moving through early, marginal VFR, possible IFR for a short time becoming VFR, probably by noontime and beyond. And Adigan, same forecast for Adigan Pass as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, VFR. In fact, the entire Alaska Range will be VFR tomorrow, rainy and windy, looking good. Isabel, VFR, Mentasta, VFR, Tanita, marginal VFR at times there, and Portage, same pattern here, lowest conditions, probably see IFR on the eastern approach, maybe even on the west side, and for Chilkoot and White, IFR, freezing levels about 4,000 feet, 4,000 to 5,000 feet over the eastern interior, 3,000 to 4,000 feet here, Gulf of Alaska southern areas, and up to 6,000 feet over the southern southeast coast, 10,000 feet now over the western Aleutians, with that warmer air out here in southerly flow, moisture coming in with areas of isolated moderate rime icing, edging eastward possibly to Adak late in the day, and also icing here with moisture moving into the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Gulf of Alaska, possibly Kodiak Island. And for the jet stream, South winds pretty strong, 115 knots into the Panhandle. Northerlies 100 knots across the western Alaska Peninsula, and then big southwest flow way out over the western Bering Sea. And at 9,000 feet, 40 to 50 knot winds from the southwest, western Bering and Aleutians, and then southeast 50 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Even stronger here over the Panhandle. 3,000 foot winds, 55 to 60 knot winds right along the coastline here, turning northerly but lighter, maybe up to 40 knots Kodiak Island, 55 knot winds there for the Aleutians. Turbulence, areas of moderate turbulence of the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island. Otherwise, pretty smooth everywhere else, maybe a little bumpy out toward the central Aleutians.
Hey Sky Nerds, I'm Trace. There are so many shapes in the sky. 88 of them are constellations, but there are lots of shapes that are often easier to spot, like the kite, which is part of Boötes the herdsman. Hit the darkness any night this week around 10 p.m. High in the northeastern sky will be the giant saucepan of the Big Dipper. If you draw an imaginary line through the handle of the Dipper along an arc, you'll arc your way to the bright star of Arcturus. Arcturus is the brightest star in Boötes the herdsman, and if you look closely, you should see this kite-shaped constellation with 7 other stars. Let's jump on the skyboard and take a look. Traveling counterclockwise from Arcturus, these 7 are Rho Boötes, Sejanus, Nakar, Delta Boötes, and Izar. The 2 hanging off either side of Arcturus are Boötes' legs, Muffred, and Zeta Boötes. What a trim figure. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal water forecast here. Gale warnings for the south coast of the Panhandle on Friday. Southeast 35 knots there. And easterlies for the central and north coast at 25 to 35 knots. Seas running 8 to 10 feet up on the north coast. Southern coast up to 14 feet. And for the central and southern inner channels and waters, small craft advisories for southeast winds, 25 knots. 5 to 8 foot seas. Lynn Canal, light north wind at 15 knots. And for Saturday, Lynn Canal, light southeast breeze at about 10. Otherwise, east 15 for Stevens Passage, south 15 for Clarence Strait, south coast, southeast 15 to 20. And for the central coast, east southeast at 20 knots, north coast, east at 20 to 25. Prince William Sound, Friday, northeast breeze at 10 knots, seas at about 2 feet. And for the eastern North Gulf Coast, northeasterlies, 25 knots. Western North Gulf Coast, same thing, northeast at 25, seas around 10 feet. North 25 for the Barren Islands, northwest at 20 for Chemishak Bay and Cook Inlet, north to northeast, 15 to 20 knots with 3 to 5 foot seas. And for Saturday, variable 10 to 15 knot winds for Cook Inlet and southeasterlies at 25 for Chemishak Bay and the Barren Islands, seas at about 8 feet in those areas. Lighter winds here for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Out of the east at 15, east 25 for the west side, Prince William Sound, variable to southeast breeze at about 10 knots. Kodiak Island, north winds 20 to 30 knots with seas 7 to 10 feet for Friday. Bristol Bay, northwest at 20. Alaska Peninsula, north to northwest 15 to 20 with 3 to 5 foot seas. And then on Saturday, those winds swing around with that front coming in from the west and pick up to about 25 to 30 knots or 20 to 30 knots from the south-southeast. Bristol Bay, southeast winds increasing to 25. Kodiak Island, east-northeast at 25 knots with 8 to 10 foot seas. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, Friday, north winds at 15 to 20 knots there with seas running 6 feet or so. And for the Adak-Atka area right through here, looking at south to southeast winds 20 to 25 and 25 knot winds out of the southeast from Chitka Island. Variable winds 10 to 20 knots for the western Aleutians. Saturday, looking at west to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots for the western Aleutians. Central Aleutians west at 25 knots. And the Fox Islands, south to southwest, 30 knots. Southwest coast for tomorrow, north to northwest breeze at 10 to 15. Variable wind, 10 knots for St. Paul, St. George, and St. Matthew Island. Only north winds at 10 knots for St. Lawrence Island. And light variable conditions, wind free for Norton Sound. But east winds at 15 knots for the Sound there on Saturday. And gale warnings coming into the Kuskokwim Delta coast. Southeasterlies 35 knots. Gale warnings also for the Pribilof Islands. Southwest at 35 knots with 9-foot seas. Yukon Delta coast south at 20. St. Matthew Island, northern Bering Sea south at about 30 knots, just under gale force. St. Lawrence Island southeast at 20. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for Friday, light east-southeast breeze at 10, south 15 for the west side, or for the central coast, west side south to southwest at 15. And for the Chukchi Sea, southerlies 10 to 15 knots. Saturday, Chukchi Sea, south to southwest east winds, 15 knots. Western Arctic coast, light southeast breeze at 10. Same thing for the central coast. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, winds light out of the east and southeast. High pressure up over the Brooks Range North Slope keeps winds light there, and conditions mostly dry. A few skips of snow scrape the eastern Arctic coast tonight with that trough swinging through. Dry over the interior, and still kind of wet here, Prince William Sound into eastern Turnagain Arm, and showers extending into the northern panhandle here, and actually all the way down to Dixon Entrance. More rain, kind of another surge of moisture coming up with this front, and we'll see that pushes northward tomorrow. Periods of rain for the southeast coast and eastern North Gulf Coast. Increasing chances of rain in the afternoon for the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island. Sunny and nice over the interior. That holds through Saturday as well, but this front brings increasing wind and rain to the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, and the Bering Strait areas. Otherwise, again, sunny and warm right from the Gulf of Alaska to the eastern Arctic coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.